Hi, welcome back to Senior Savvy Cannabis. This is Catherine Goldberg. Today on the podcast, we have a very special guest. We have Dr. Vet Tim Shu, and Tim Shu has been in the cannabis industry for about 10 years, and he's coming to us as a vet to speak to us about the science behind cannabis and animals, whether that comes to animals and aging, animals with quality of life, animals with various issues. I followed Dr. Tim Shu's work for nearly a decade. So I'm going to kind of feel like a fangirl for 2 seconds and just say it's such an honor to have you. Um, and yeah, thank you for joining us. So, Dr. Tim, can you tell us why it's sort of a big deal that vets can talk about cannabis? Because it seems like you go to a vet, you have a sick animal, the doctor would recommend whatever treatment is going to be most effective. So, can we start off with that? Because I know there's a little bit more to it than meets the eye.
Sure. And thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. So the whole reason why I got into the cannabis space to begin with was when I was in practice, I saw what was happening on the human side of things. People were using medical cannabis in humans, and they were successfully using it for a number of things, including things like chronic pain, nausea, appetite loss. And so the question that I had was, can we use this in animals as well? Because if animals are able to benefit from medical cannabis or cannabinoids, however you want to say it, and we're not presenting the information and we're not presenting the ability to benefit from it, we're really doing those animals a disservice, and we're doing their pet owners a disservice, because anytime there is a means to be able to improve the lives of the animals, but we're not utilizing it, is really unfortunate. And so for me, I set about going to find out whether or not cannabis can be beneficial for animals. And back in 2014, and 2015, when I started getting into the industry, there was a lot of pushback. A lot of veterinarians thought that was just crazy because they only associated with cannabis as marijuana for recreational use. And they didn't understand that cannabis actually has a medicinal side. And that medicinal side isn't just important for humans, but it's also important for animals as well. And over the course of the years, we've actually been able to pass two bills in California that allow for California veterinarians to both discuss and recommend cannabis for their clients to be used in their patients. So that was something that was huge, and that was something that was the first of its kind in the nation, and really set the bar for where we could have that conversation and how we could have that conversation between veterinarians and clients.
Incredible. And the way that you're speaking about it, it sounds like, is California the only state that has this?
As far as I know, California is the only state that has those legal protections in place, where it literally says California veterinarians are allowed to discuss and recommend cannabis to their clients, and they are protected by law.
Without facing, because if they had had that conversation, let's say theoretically 20 years ago, could they have been could they have worried that they would have gotten in trouble legally, that they
Yeah, so that's what a lot of veterinarians were afraid of, and that's the whole reason why a lot of veterinarians wouldn't even touch the subject when their clients brought it up, and that's still the case in a lot of veterinarians that aren't up to speed on these laws, and also in other states, a lot of veterinarians are afraid of just even talking about it, just even providing that information. I literally talk to pet owners all the time who says that when they bring it up to their veterinarians, it's like a huge taboo word. It's almost like Voldemort. You can't even say the name. And so that's really unfortunate, because what happens then is, these pet owners, they still want that information, and they're supposed to be able to get that information from their veterinarian. But when their veterinarian's not open to talking about it, well, then they also, they go online, they ask family and friends. And what ends up happening is they ask people that are not necessarily medical professionals for advice. And so that's one of the most unfortunate things, is that the people that should be giving that medical advice aren't doing so in a lot of cases.
that's wild. And thank you for pointing that out. this blog and podcast is only 2 months old. So I've been kind of deciding what we want to touch on. And it's not a political podcast in the slightest, but without understanding why and how things came to be, I don't really think we're able to pivot. So I appreciate the historical background that you provided. I know that because I've seen you speak before and I'm a big fan, you came up with an acronym that I'm good with acronyms as long as they're short because spelling words that are longer it never works well. But can you tell us about the acronym that you teach to vets and pet owners to discuss what conditions can possibly benefit the most from cannabis?
Sure. The reason why I came up with this acronym is having been in the cannabis space for a decade now, I was going to dispensaries every single day and I would hear all kinds of medical claims. There tends to be people that are very gung-ho about cannabis. And over the years, I've heard claims that cannabis can be useful and beneficial for just about everything under the sun, which is not true, which is not the case, And so I looked at the scientific evidence, what kind of research had been done and published. I talked to people that were using cannabis for their animals. I talked to veterinarians and what they had seen. And I came up with the acronym PAINS. So it's spelled P.A.I.N.S. And this acronym is based off of the scientific evidence that's currently available that supports the medical benefits of cannabis. And so the PAINS acronym stands for pain, anxiety, inflammation, nausea and appetite loss, and seizures. So these are the things that we have the greatest amount of evidence to support the use of medical cannabis for. That's not to say that these are the only things that medical cannabis can be beneficial for, but these are the most common uses with the most amount of scientific data to back that up.
Not to get too into the nitty gritty biology here, because I have a feeling our audience doesn't really care about that part, but can you briefly speculate, based on the evidence that you've read, how on earth one plant could help with so many different varying conditions? Because you mentioned seizures and you mentioned anxiety. It seems like these are two different brain states. So what exactly is cannabis doing that could provide any sort of relief to these five different categories?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question because when we look at our current toolkit in medicine, there's not really anything that's quite like what CBD is capable of. There are some medications out there that have multi-uses. For example, there's some medications that are used for pain, but at the same time, they're also used for anxiety relief. But to have one molecule be effective in the use of five or more different conditions, that's incredibly rare. And I can't think off the top of my head anything else in the pharmaceutical cabinet that actually does something like that. And so there's two components to unpack and to look into. One side is the endocannabinoid system, and the other side is the what we can call the promiscuity of cannabinoids like CBD. The endocannabinoid system is a recently discovered body system that was only discovered about 35 years ago. And this is one of the body system that sits alongside, your other body systems like your circulatory system, your nervous system, your GI tract. It is something that exists all throughout your body, going from your brain into your muscles, your organs, all tissues in all sorts of tissues in your body. And it exists not just in humans, dogs, and cats, but it also exists in other vertebrate animals. So basically, any animal that has a backbone, they have an endocannabinoid system. And this endocannabinoid system is deeply intertwined with a number of bodily functions. It helps to regulate things like sleep, mood, memory, appetite, and even movement and reproduction. So this is something that is deeply intertwined in a lot of organs and tissue and helps to regulate the body. And so when we think about molecules like cannabinoids, we have plant-based molecules like CBD and THC, but we also have cannabinoids that our own bodies produce. And these cannabinoids that our bodies produce are involved in the regulatory mechanism of the endocannabinoid system. And cannabinoids from the plant, like CBD and THC, interact with a number of different molecules. So when we look at just say CBD, for example, it's been documented that there's over 40 different molecular targets that it interacts with. And so this is one case for trying to understand, how CBD can potentially be beneficial for so many different things is because it interacts with so many different molecules. So for example, we know that it interacts with the serotonin receptor 5-HT1A. And through that interaction, that could be one way it decreases anxiety. And so these are just one of many ways that cannabinoids can do a number of different things in the body.
That's so fascinating. Okay, if the audience comments and says we want more of the science, we're going to have you back if that's okay.
Yeah.
It's so cool, so cool. Okay, let me ask you a question that I think a lot of people are wondering about. When you go on Amazon and you type in CBD pet treats, you get a lot of options. You get a ton. They have thousands upon thousands of reviews. The efficacy can go either way, but can you tell us exactly what is being sold on Amazon and if it's really what we think we're getting? Because I, like our audience, have been duped as well. So can you tell us about this a bit?
Yeah, so when you have a hemp product, it can be a little bit confusing because the hemp plant can produce a number of different things that you can make products with, right? The cannabinoids like CBD actually come from the flower of the female cannabis or hemp plant. It comes in these little glands called trichomes that cover the flowers. Now, on the other hand, you can produce other products with the hemp plant. For example, you can take the seeds of the hemp plant, and when you press the seeds, you get a hemp seed oil. And so you could actually create a product with hemp seed oil and call it a hemp product. And so this is where a lot of the confusion lies, is because when you have something that's called a hemp product, that doesn't necessarily mean that it contains any CBD. So it could just be a hemp product that's made with hemp seed oil and not contain any CBD or any cannabinoids at all. And so when you have marketplaces like Amazon that actually don't allow for any CBD products, you can still find hemp products, but these are products that are made of hemp seed oil that don't contain any CBD. And what's tricky about that is a lot of times they're marketed in a way that can be a little bit deceptive. For example, if you pull up CBD or if you just search CBD on Amazon, you'll find these products that say that they're hemp products and that they contain 1,000 milligrams or sometimes something even ridiculous like 100,000 milligrams, right? But they're not actually referencing CBD, even though it looks like they may be, because they're referring to something that is not CBD. It may be the weight of the hemp seed oil that they're using, or the weight of the whole product that they're creating. But that's where a lot of people have a misunderstanding, is that just because something is labeled as a hemp product does not necessarily mean that it contains any CBD. The other part of that is a hemp product, the hemp industry is not, it doesn't have regulations for the final form product. When you grow the hemp plant, you do have to test the hemp plant to make sure that it contains a low enough amount of THC to be classified as a hemp product or a hemp plant. But what you do after that doesn't require any testing. So what happens is when people create hemp products or CBD products from hemp, the final form product isn't required to undergo any sort of testing. And so what tends to happen is, because testing is expensive, a lot of companies will actually skip that step. And so you have had studies in the past conducted by the FDA, by the University of Pennsylvania, that actually pulled a lot of CBD products from the shelf. And what they found was that these products didn't have anywhere near what they claimed they had because they didn't have to undergo any sort of final form testing. And so you could have a product that says that it has 100 milligrams of CBD, but in actuality, when it's tested, it may contain 50 milligrams, or in some cases, it contains 0 milligrams of CBD. And so that's where it gets really tricky for the consumers on the hemp side, is because sometimes they may not be using products that have any CBD at all.
Whoa. Okay. Um, I think people are not aware of this. I think people have no clue. And since I don't want to be any sort of pessimist in any way, and I also would not discount the placebo effect because it's well documented in people. I don't really know if it's well documented in animals, but is there any efficacy to hemp oil with any of those conditions that are spelled out in the P.A.I.N.S acronym?
Not really, no. I mean, the hemp seed oil is it's a nutritious oil, something that you can cook with, or you can make food with, or you can make salad dressing with. But to really be able to tap into the medical effects of cannabis or hemp, you are really looking at the cannabinoids. The hemp seed oil, that's more for something along the lines of culinary use. It's not anything that we should consider for medical purposes or benefits.
Okay, I appreciate the explanation. And then, so now I have a follow-up question. So it seems like consumers have two choices, especially consumers that live in states where medical marijuana is legal. They can purchase a CBD product that contains a little bit of THC, which, as a lot of evidence suggests, based on the entourage effect makes it the CBD even more effective. Then, and tell me if I have this wrong, does that mean that there's also a line of hemp products that do contain cannabinoids? Or if you're purchasing a specifically hemp product, does that automatically mean it contains no cannabinoids by definition? Is that clear?
Yeah, so it's we can dive into this because it actually does get a little bit confusing. Hemp products can contain cannabinoids, absolutely. Now, where it gets tricky is, you have the licensed cannabis space, and in the licensed cannabis space, you have your products that are sold through dispensaries. Those products have to undergo state testing for a number of different things before, each product is able to be sold in a dispensary. So, for example, in California, every single product that gets created has to be tested for potency to make sure whatever is on the label actually matches what's in the product. It has to be tested for pesticides, residual solvents, mycotoxins, bacteria, and heavy metals. On the hemp side of things, there's no requirement for that testing.
Mm.
And so that's where you have a lot of products that claim X amount of milligrams of this or that cannabinoid, but it may not actually have that. So where it gets a little bit tricky is that this, on the hemp side of things, this is something that's constantly evolving. This is where, it's kind of something that's a different topic, but this is where, a lot of states and companies are getting into this battle of extracting Delta 9 THC from hemp and selling that. Or what they're doing is they're utilizing cannabinoids like CBD and converting that into Delta 8. So that's where it gets a little bit complicated, but you can absolutely extract cannabinoids from the hemp plant. What's important is that if you are going to purchase cannabinoids that are hemp-based or sourced from hemp, that you go with a company or you go with a product that test every single batch that they create, so that way they are actually testing for things like potency, pesticides, solvents, heavy metals, mycotoxins, and bacteria, so that you're getting a good quality product in each and every batch that they create.
Amazing. Okay, cool. That's a really great answer. So I asked my audience to submit questions before our chat. And the one question that kept on coming up was sort of about the betterment of well animals. This idea that we have animals who are aging gracefully and don't have any issues, but we want to keep them mobile. We want to keep their attitude up. Um, is there any evidence, either anecdotally or in the literature, that suggests that that owners should consider some form of cannabis as a nutritional supplement for their well animals? The same way that many of us use cannabis to manage our sleep, pain, anxiety, mood, etc.
It's a good question, and there haven't been any studies that have looked into this. So, the kind of study that would look into this is if, they followed a group of dogs or cats over the course of their life, and one group took CBD for the course of their life and the control group didn't. What would the end results be? We don't know. There's not been any studies that I know of that have specifically looked at that. Now, having said that, I could see the case to be made for both sides, right? So on one side, if they're healthy, if they're being fed a high quality diet, then that should be sufficient, right? And you wouldn't necessarily need to add anything else on. On the other hand, we do have increasing evidence that cannabinoids like CBD have anti-inflammatory effects, that they have neuroprotectant effects. And so could those be beneficial in otherwise healthy patients over the course of the long term? I think it's entirely possible to make the case for that, right? It's kind of like on the human side of things, we know that chronic inflammation is terrible over the course of our lifetime, right? Chronic long-term stress, chronic long-term inflammation is very unhealthy. We know that in the Western diet, there's a severe imbalance of omega-6 compared to omega-3. So, for humans, does taking omega-3 supplement make sense to be able to potentially tone down that inflammation? Yeah, I certainly think it does. I myself take omega-3 supplements. Um, other people will advocate for things like vitamin D intake because, we may not be able to get sufficient amounts of vitamin D, even if we go out into the sun. And so I can see the case being made for both sides. And right now, I don't think we have the evidence pointing to one direction or the other. And I certainly don't think that I'm not aware of any studies out there that have specifically addressed this. But it is an interesting question. And so I think the jury's still out, and I think we'll be able to hopefully have a better idea within the next few years, because in terms of the scientific literature, in terms of the studies looking at cannabinoids in the endocannabinoid system, we have seen a huge uptick in those studies in the scientific literature over the past 10 years.
Amazing. It seems like a common theme of senior savvy is that we have more control than we think. We have more control over our health. We have more control over how we feel. And I think there are a lot of pet owners who are sort of in a state of their pet is suffering and they don't know what to do and they're not getting the answers they want. And I'm hoping that after they see this conversation, at least hopefully they'll have a sense of relief that maybe there are avenues to explore that they haven't explored yet. Because even though we've been doing this for a decade, I forget that the rest of the world still thinks this is brand new. So as we end this conversation, and hopefully it's the first of many because you're fabulous and I'd love to have you back. Is there anything that you'd like pet owners to know, to think about, to marinate on, just that maybe that hasn't occurred to them in the past?
I think something that tags on to that previous question that I did want to bring up is that sometimes, well, not sometimes, it's actually fairly frequently in older cat populations, for example, that there are certain conditions that are underdiagnosed. For example, we know that in older cat populations, arthritis is severely underdiagnosed. And so in those situations, the owner may think that the like an older cat is perfectly healthy, but when you question them, and they may be like, yeah, he hasn't been as active as he used to be. He hasn't been as mobile. He doesn't jump as high, or he doesn't jump onto the furniture like he used to. And so there actually could be underlying conditions that pet owners aren't always aware of. And this is why, going to your vet to be able to get those checkups is important, is key, because you may be dealing with a situation of early onset of arthritis or early onset of some other condition that may not necessarily be overtly clear to the pet owner, but the veterinarian may be able to see that. And so those are the cases where the pet owner may be able to provide relief sooner rather than later. So that is something that I would like people to consider and think about, is the importance of having a yearly checkup with the veterinarian, because there are a lot of times pet owners just may not see certain things that the veterinarian does.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Please get your pets checked out yearly or twice yearly. The vets love them. It's important for everyone. The cost is well worth it. Just please take your animals to the vet regularly, because it seems like, also besides quality of life, if they catch something early, it's potentially manageable. If they don't catch it early, it could be life threatening. So, why put yourself in that position? And for our audience in California, in Los Angeles, in the Valley, I will link to Bears Vet, because they're fabulous. And shout out to Blue Cross Vet Hospital. So thank you, Dr. Shu. This was a really, really enlightening conversation on so many different levels. And I'm so thankful for your expertise in these different fields, and your ability to really read the scientific literature at such a level and really kind of parse through it and explain it for us, because that's really dense. It's not always that easy to get through. And, I'm hoping that in the next, like you said, 5 years, that this conversation won't be as much of a novelty, that it'll just be something that people know about for aging pets. But of course, you give them cannabinoids, like who wouldn't? So thank you for leading the charge on that, and for being a pioneer for over a decade. And thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. I appreciate it. And anyone that's curious, I encourage them to have that conversation with their veterinarian. Just ask. It's not going to hurt to ask. Because what I've seen over the past decade is I've seen a wall slowly come down, from the point where veterinarians would just push back and just, dismiss cannabis as something that was a recreational drug for humans, to the point where now a lot of veterinarians have a keen interest in it, because they've seen through their patients what CBD and other cannabinoids are capable of, because their clients went out and tried it for themselves. So we've seen that barrier, that wall of communication come down, and we still have a lot of work to do. There's still a lot of veterinarians out there that are uncomfortable with the topic, but when they see more and more of their clients asking and having an interest about it, they will feel obligated to get up to speed on that topic, to be able to provide their clients with the most up-to-date information.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And that's something we can all do to take a step in the right direction. So thank you so much.
You bet. Thanks, Catherine.
Appreciate it.